They have something going on at with the ELOC, no? Is ELOC tonight?
Oh wait, no, tomorrow and Friday for ELOP.
Something going on at sorry.
And then I think there's another one tomorrow for
God.
EL or DLI.
Oh, there's a lot of good stuff happening in Albert. Hi, Yvonne. Thank you for joining us. Actually,
Hello.
yeah, we can hear you. Actually, let me set the interpretation so that we add a different language.
Hi.
Hi, Yvonne.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
There we go. Hi, Michelle. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just about a minute or so. Oh, I didn't realize I didn't have my camera on. Let me see the status of the text reminder. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just about a minute or so with our conversation on summative assessments, just end of the year tests. Let me give some time for our community to get the text and log on. Okay, text has been sent out, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is a conversation on summative assessment measures. You might know them as end of the year tests, is what a lot of our students call them, our teachers call them, and definitely I, as a father, I would call them that. And our guest presenter today, our resident expert, is Ms. Heather Goodwin. Ms. Goodwin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Dr. Cisneros. Happy to be here tonight and have the opportunity to share what's coming up for many of our students here in the spring in terms of summative assessments. And
Beautiful.
thank you, families, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. I'd like to start off just by giving a thank you on behalf of the Board of Education. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your time. We know that Albert has a lot of really great programs, a lot of talented staff members, but we can't lead your child to excellence on our own. We can't do it without you. So thank you for being here for an hour, 30 minutes, 45 minutes at a time, however long you can spare with us for this dialogue over the course of the 13, 14 years that your kids are in preschool, kinder through 12th grade graduation. It really adds up to a lot of success for students. I'd like to remind you that we do have question and answer. We have a Q&A in the Zoom tools. So find the Q&A option. If you have a question, you can also drop something into the chat. If you don't want to type things in, but you would actually like to speak and verbalize your question, just raise your hand and it will let you unmute your microphone and by clicking the unmute mic option and actually speak, so we don't have to, type out a long question. You can just say it. And then if you need to leave, these sessions are always live streamed. It's currently live streamed on our YouTube page, recorded for you to access. If you miss anything, you can go to our Albert Schools YouTube page. We do have interpretation. We have 2 languages available for you. If you need this information in Spanish, si necesita esta información en español, en la parte inferior de su pantalla verá una opción que dice Interpretation, es una esfera, un globo. Si no ve eso, podrá ver una opción que dice More o más y cambia el idioma de inglés a español. If you need this information in Arabic, we have our Arabic interpreter, Naima. Zoom does not have the option to specify that we are translating into Arabic. However, you can select Russian as your language, and you will listen into Naima, who is currently doing our English to Arabic interpretation. So we have this now in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Arabic. And again, Arabic is under the Russian. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Goodwin to go into the summative assessments.
Thank you again, Dr. Cisneros. So we're going to kick it off with some summative assessment basics. Before we even get into this slide, let's talk about summative assessments as they are. They are assessments that kids take or tests that kids take at the end of the year, and they are either required by the state of California or by the federal government or some combination thereof. So it's not something that we just do here in Alvord, but it's something that the entire student body in the state of California participates in some instances across the country as well. Okay. So our summative assessments here in Alvord, as part of California and federal requirements, we have the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, called CASP. You'll also heard it referred to as CASP. And alongside that are the California Alternate Assessments, also known as CAW or CAA. Those assessments are administered in 3 different areas: English Language Arts, or ELA, math, and science. We also have our English Language Proficiency Assessment for California, also known as LPAC, and its counterpart, the alternate LPAC. The third assessment that you'll see there is the California Spanish Assessment, or CSA. And we'll go into more detail about all of these assessments, but those are kind of the big 3 that you see here in Alvord. You'll notice that there's an asterisk, and we've also color-coded the California Alternate Assessment and Alternate LPAC, because these assessments are set aside for those students that have the most significant cognitive disabilities. They definitely have an IEP, and oftentimes they are on a certificate of completion track rather than a diploma track. Our summative assessment data is used in part to help inform our multi-tiered system of support. This is what schools and teachers use in the classroom to make sure that we meet the unique needs of all of our students. Ideally, we would have the majority of our students in Tier 1. Those students are successful, receiving universal supports and core instruction. And then depending on student needs, they may have a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 need in a specific content area. Perhaps a student excels in ELA, but needs some support in math, or vice versa. And these tiers are fluid, so students can move in and out of those tiers within a given year or across years. Lots of communication occurs within the system as well. You know that you receive grade reports, progress reports, report cards through Parent Square and through Aries, Parent Portal. That's one means of communication. We have parent-teacher conferences that occur throughout the school year as well, and all those informal communication that you have with your child's teacher and with the school as well. So all of that tells you and helps paint a picture of how well your student is doing in different subject areas as they progress through their public education.
And Ms. Goodwin, thank you for bringing up the point of the continuous communication that our teachers and our parents have. But you mentioned specifically like parent-teacher conferences, those special events. Can or how can our parents reach out in between open houses and back to schools and parent-teacher conferences to ask questions about their specific child?
That's a really great question. Every school has that parent square feature turned on so that you can reach out to your child's teacher and or site admin. In addition, many of our schools use additional platforms like Class Dojo or Remind to keep you connected with your school and with your child's teacher. You can send handwritten notes with your student. We know what happens with some of those, right? They get lost in along the way, right? Between home and school, sometimes they get misplaced, but it certainly is an option. You can call the school, you can visit the school. Do know that if you visit the school, the front office will be more than happy to help you set up an appointment to come back and have a conversation with the teacher, because we don't want to interrupt learning time for our students. But always an option. You can also send emails directly to your child's teacher. But great question. Thank you, Dr. Cisneros. So what are some of the basics about CASP? CASP is the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, and it includes those assessments that address English language arts, math, science, and Spanish language arts. They're not given to all students, however. So for ELA, students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 are all participating in that test. The same holds true for math, grades 3 through 8 and 11. Science is a little bit different. Students take the science test or the CAST test in 5th grade, 8th grade, and then once during high school. Typically that occurs in grade 11, but if for some reason they missed that in their 11th grade year, then they would pick it up and take it as a senior. The Spanish Language Arts Assessment, or CSA, is given to students enrolled in our dual language immersion program in grades 3 through 8. We have our first cohort of DLI students entering high school, and so once they reach grade 11, then they will participate in the SLA as well. You'll see that note that just as all students participate in those grades in those tests, if they are a student with the most significant cognitive disability and it is noted in their IEP, they may take the alternate assessment. An important thing to note about alternate assessments, if the IEP team feels that an alternate assessment is appropriate for a student, then they participate in the alternate assessment for every assessment. So if they are included in the California alternate assessment for ELA, they would also take the alternate assessment for math, for science when they are in that tested grade, and if they are an English learner, they would also participate in the alternate LPAC. The CASP window is open at the state level from the beginning of March through the end of May. Here in Alvord, we have smaller windows of administration, and your site has that information about what their window is. So different sites have different shorter windows of administration within that March to May timeline. The LPAC assessment is another required summative assessment that students who are identified as English learners take once a year in the spring. This test opens a little bit earlier. So it actually opened this Monday, this previous Monday, February 3rd, and it runs through the end of May as well. This test is comprised of 4 different sections: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. For most students, the listening, reading, and writing portions are administered in a group setting, while the speaking portion of the assessment is administered one-to-one with a trained Alvord employee. And again, our students who are identified as an English learner take this in every grade except TK, and that's brand new this year. So kindergarten through grade 12, if they are identified as an English learner, they would participate in this test every spring.
Ms. Goodwin, would we be able to ask you, not just the LPAC, but even going into these summative assessments, what are they used for by the school or the teacher? How do the results inform the support that the school or teacher provide to individual students?
Great question. The results from the CASP and LPAC are used in a variety of ways. Some of the results are used to help inform the California School Dashboard, which is like a thermometer of how schools and districts are performing. At the school level, they look at the results to identify trends or areas of opportunity that the site, grade levels, departments, etc., may want to focus on based on the needs of their particular students. So for example, if they were to administer the LPAC and a site looked at the data and noticed that their students were doing really well in the listening domain, but not performing as strongly in the writing domain, sites might want to have an additional focus on the writing program at that school. They might bring in opportunities for teachers to have professional learning around how to support English learners in developing writing skills. They might give teachers additional time for instructional planning for writing lessons specifically geared towards English learners. And the same holds true for CASP. So they might find that their ELA scores at a particular school or a particular grade level were strong. However, math showed a greater area of opportunity. They might dig into those areas within math and re-engage students in some of that content to help address the gaps and fill the gaps and increase performance for the next year.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, these assessments are really meant more for us to use, to drive changes that we're making to support all students, rather than identify a student as either doing really well or not well.
Yeah.
Because this test, any of these tests, are given at one point in time, once during the school year. So it's a very, very small snapshot of how a student may be performing. So when you're getting those results as parents, you absolutely want to take into consideration how a student did, but take into consideration as well that this was a single test on a single day, and the student is at school 180 days. So it should be just one of the measures that you're looking at to determine how your student is doing. Report card grades, their work coming home, conversations that you're having with your students, and what your school and what your teachers are telling you about how your student is doing is also quite important.
And I think that, in my time as a teacher and now in the role as coordinator of family engagement, one of the questions that has come up in discussions with families regarding summative assessments is boils down to, and I'm sorry being a little crass, a little crude here, is why should my kid care? Like, why does it matter that they do well or not? What would you say to a child who says, I don't care about this test?
You know, as our kids get older, I think we see more and more instances of that, right? So by the time they are in high school, we hear a lot more feedback about, hey, look, I'm taking all of these other assessments. I've got finals, I've got my AP exams. This really isn't a big deal, right? Because it's not going to impact my grade. You're right, it's not going to impact your grade because these assessments are not used for grading purposes. However, they are one measure of a student having the opportunity to show how hard they've been working at school and how much they've progressed in their learning. And back to the example I gave earlier, if a student isn't putting forth their best effort, when the school gets those results back, they may plan instruction for the student that might not actually reflect that student's needs, right? So if I were that student and I'm in high school, and Dr. Cisneros, I know you said don't mean to be crass about this, but it comes up, right? And thank you, it does come up. So if I'm that student who comes in and says, I don't care about this test, I'm gonna click my way through it. They don't do very well on the assessment. The school takes a look at those results and it might help inform the course that they're placed in.
Yep.
It might also dictate the kind of lessons that a teacher is planning for the student to close gaps that may not exist, because a teacher may not know when your student enters the classroom that they just click through the test.
Yeah, and I think that's you bring up a good point. When I was in the classroom, I was a teacher at Loma Vista. Go Lions! I would see those test results, and then I would make my small groups in the classroom based on that assessment. I would plan my lessons for particular students, or support or extension for particular students based on that test. So if we have a student who just kind of clicks through an assessment and they don't really give us an accurate picture of how well they know the content, that's going to really skew and mess up the support that they're given or not given. We do have a question that came in from Esther Hernandez. How long do students have to take the test?
So the tests are not timed tests. Depending on the grade level or grade span, there's an estimated time for students to take each section of this, whether it's ELA or math or science, but it's not a timed test. So they're encouraged to take the time that they need to really show what they know.
So it's not timed, it's just however long the student needs. Right.
Oftentimes students can finish a content area or a portion of the content area in a period or two. And the reason I say a portion is because most of the assessments, like for ELA, math, and science, the test has two components. It has a computer adapted portion of the test, and it has a performance task area of the test. Most of the time, students are able to finish one part of that, either the computer adaptive portion of the test or the performance task area of the test, within a period or two at secondary and within a block or two at elementary. That computer, since we're talking about that, the computer adapted portion of the test, how that works is students are asked a question, and based on their response, the next question that they receive, or the next series of questions that they receive, will either become a little more challenging or a little less difficult. So they'll be given a question. If they answer it correctly, they'll get a little bit more challenging question. If they answer that initial question incorrectly, they may get a little bit less difficult question next. And what the assessment platform is trying to do is really pinpoint where that student is performing in relation to their grade level standards. And it's not just based on that first question, but every question that they answer. So I answered this one correct. I got a more difficult one. I answered that one incorrect. It's going to come down and it's going to try to find where the sweet spot is for that student. Then we have a performance task portion of the test. And that performance task portion of the test is where students are asked to apply their understanding to a real world type situation.
Ms. Goodwin, we have a question in the chat from just iPhone. It says, how does this assessment tell us about how our students are doing relative to maybe students from another district or in another city?
It's a standardized assessment. So that means we can tell how our students are doing compared to students in other districts within the state of California, students within the county of Riverside. That is one of the reasons why we administer standardized tests, because we can compare apples to apples. So great question there.
And then we have another question that came in just now from Laura. Why even do the test when we know that the results might not be correct because the students believe that tests don't matter? What an interesting question.
It really is, right?
Yeah.
We can get philosophical in this a little bit, right? But I guess probably the easiest way I can answer that is in how we are framing the opportunity for our students, both as educators and as parents and family members. Our education system is built to respond to the needs of all of our students. And one of the ways that we do that is to really use something that is standardized, that has gone through a rigorous development process. And so we want to encourage our students to show what they've been working hard learning all year, to set goals for themselves, because it's not about how they perform or the level in which they perform as much as it is about their growth, because every student is going to have their own unique path of learning, and the rate of learning is going to vary amongst our kids. But what we want to see is that over time, they're making growth. And so I think a lot has to do with how we frame it for our students and being transparent with them about the importance of administering the test and why we want to use the data and how we can use the data to help them as well.
Absolutely. And if Ms. Goodwin, if you don't mind, I'd like to just add to that, just to remind our families that Alvord has a lot of support personnel. So we do have obviously fantastic, highly qualified teachers. But on top of that, a lot of our schools count on school counselors, on instructional coaches, on numeracy and literacy specialists. I mean, there is a lot of support throughout the district. So if a child performs maybe not as well as they could have, what that might trigger is this additional support to be provided to the child that maybe they might not need, or if the child does really well, again, all of these highly qualified, just dynamic staff members that we have throughout the school district then kind of push the child a little bit more, and they give extension and enrichment activities. So the results that we receive, as Ms. Goodwin stated, they are looked at by the school, and the principals and the staff all around the district really use that to inform the instructional supports that students are provided. What a fantastic question.
And I'm gonna answer it from a different perspective as well.
Okay.
Which is the accountability perspective. So now I'm going to change my hat a little bit. The state of California has accountability measures in place, and one of them is participation in the summative assessments. And it is included in how our California school dashboards reflect the data. And we're required to have at least 95% of our students and every student group participate in the summative assessments. And anytime that we fall below that 95% threshold, we essentially receive a penalty. So it's called the loss score, the lowest obtainable scale score. And so for every student overall or within a student group at both the site level and at the district level, for every student that we fall below that 95% threshold, we're assessed a penalty of a loss score, and it brings down our performance at the school level and at the district level when our students don't participate. And that affects us as a community because it may not be representative of the great things that are happening in our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin.
Some of the ways that you can help, just having conversations with your student and having those academic type of conversations, because we know there's a different kind of discourse and language structure that we use when we're talking about school and about learning than we do when we are talking with our friend about video games, right? So having those kinds of conversations with your kids is really important. Reading with them or having them read to you. And again, engaging them in what's being read. So it's not just about the act of reading, but it's about understanding what's being read to them or what they're reading. So asking them those follow-up questions. Who's your favorite character in this story? What makes them your favorite character? What do you think about the plot here? I really like this twist, right? Partnering with your child's teacher or teachers, as well as the school. Oftentimes our school, and Dr. Cisneros pointed out, there's a ton of resources available at your school, and they do vary across schools and across levels. Volunteer in the classroom, get to know the front office staff, because I'll tell you, if you know the front office staff at your school, you will learn a great deal about what's happening on that campus, and they can be your greatest resource. There are practice and training tests that are available to you as a parent and to students. Now, those practice tests are a little bit longer than the training tests, but have more tailored content to a grade level or content area. The training tests are much shorter. They're usually about 6 to 10 questions, and they're really to help familiarize you and or your student with the platform, because our students take these assessments online. So that gives them an opportunity to play around with the different types of questions that may be on the test. There are some where students are asked to drag and drop things or type in a response, or even the difference between a multiple choice question where they select one right answer and a multiple select question, which looks the same, except the expectation is that they have more than one answer. Khan Academy and Homework Hotline are linked there as well. Some of our sites across the district also support that. And again, going through your school's website and or having your student log in through ClassLink might show you some additional resources and opportunities as well, and they vary by level in school.
Ms. Goodwin, we received a question in the chat that I'm not sure if it is within the scope of this presentation, and maybe we can get that parents' information and follow up later, or maybe we could schedule another presentation for that issue in particular, because we really want to keep our conversations geared towards the topic of discussion. But the question is, I missed the first part of this recording, Ms. Goodwin. my fear of lack of traditional gate testing. Kids that are more advanced are not getting challenged throughout the school day. They have special times and breakout sessions, but that's not the case most of the day.
I definitely think that's a question that we can follow up with if we have that parent's contact information, or we can schedule another evening session.
And I think they have another, they said, sorry, I would like to just voice one last concern. Grading, at least at an elementary level, from what I've seen, is not objective. Grades are 1 through 4, but there is no objective data from the teachers, syllabus to what constitutes a 3 versus a 4. This also makes it difficult to parents to see where kids are relative to some other metric. And Laura just seconded or highlighted that. Again, I think I can give my direct email, my direct cell phone number. We can make this connection to Miss Goodwin. I would also encourage you to reach out to the child's teacher and principal to have this dialogue on what is constituting a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and then what specific enrichment and extension students get who are a little bit more advanced and they already understand the material. Ms. Goodwin, is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
I think that's perfect. It definitely is unique to the student's teacher, right? Teachers have the ability to provide those grades, so great place to start is following up with the teacher.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to spend some time here, Ms. Goodwin, if we might, on the CAST and LPAC practice and training tests. I know that you're providing us with these Start Smart web pages, and let me link it into our chat for our families to have access to. But let's go into the CAST. This is for practice tests, correct, Ms. Goodwin?
This is actually going to give you a wealth of resources, not just the practice test, but it is linked in there as well. So we will get to that.
Let me go into it. There we go. Okay, Ms. Goodwin, guide us.
So it starts off just by letting you know that after your child has participated in one or more of the summative assessments, that they're going to get a score report. And there are parent guides linked here to understanding what that score report looks like and what information it will share with you. We went over that in one of our earlier sessions, I think, Dr. Cisneros?
We sure did, yeah.
In the early fall, and so I anticipate that we will do that again next year. Typically, the score reports come in over the summer, so oftentimes families will see them if they're really monitoring their parent portal. They may catch it over the summer, but oftentimes families will see it just as the following school year starts. If we keep scrolling down on that page, a little bit more, we will get to check out the test questions. Perfect. So this is an opportunity for you as a parent to experience what your student may be seeing. You can change the subject area. So let's take a look at an elementary math item. So and I'll let you pick from there.
And let's go into 3rd grade, since 3rd grade is the first year where students take the CAST.
Perfect.
And then we can get a little bit more specific into a claim, mathematical practices. So now we select.
Yep. And our mathematical practices often will be our performance tasks. So if we scroll down there, we should see some sample test questions. So that very first one is an example of a drag and drop item that students may experience. So they're going to drag one number inside each box to make each number statement true. So this is about fractions. So how can we make 1?
Okay, so then the child would have to drag a 4 over a 4 to recognize and to show that they realize that whole numbers are the same thing as same numerator and same denominator.
Yep, you've got it.
I passed 3rd grade, Miss Goodwin. Um,
Math looks so different than it did when at least
yeah,
I was in school, that's
for
for
sure.
sure.
And then if the child or parents are struggling, depending on the grade that you select, you can show the correct answer. And then it
Mhm.
shows all of the different ways that a child can show their mastery.
Yes. Yep. So several examples just here within third grade math, right? So this is a great way as a parent. Maybe you want to brush up on some skills. I know that I've had kids come up and say it's homework time, and I have been a little nervous
Yeah.
about helping with homework because it does look so different than it did, certainly when I was in school. So I played around with this and I'm like, oh, I understand now. I understand what my third grader is experiencing at school and how I might be able to help them.
And then one other thing that I appreciate about this, not only the um, format that the students will be asked to show their answers in, but then you can also quickly change from one claim to the next to see both types of questions that the child is going to have to answer. And so in this one, you'll notice it says student response here. And so they actually have to enter something in, type something in, where before they were having to either drag and drop or select.
And these are samples, right? So we're not going to interact necessarily with the items as we're viewing them here. This is just an example, just some samples. When we look at the practice test, then we can actually interact with the items. And
Um,
I'm not sure if you can scroll down and still see the practice test, or you have to go back in your browser.
I do not see the practice test, so let's go back. And so we had test questions. Oh, here's the practice test. This is the one you mean?
Yep. So check out the test in action. You can sign in as a guest, so anybody can do this. Parents, family members, kids, even kids at different grade levels. So I might be a middle school student and I want to check out the fifth grade test. That's okay. Or vice versa. I might be a middle schooler and I want to see what's in store for me when I'm a junior in high school.
Well, for example, right now, I'm really curious about the 11th grade test. And so going back to what Miss Goodwin had initially started our presentation on all the different tests that students will or may be taking, you can see the practice test for the science test, the alternate assessments, as Miss Goodwin said, depending on the child's, if they have an IEP that specifies the alternate assessment. But where's the CAS? Did I pass it?
ELA and math. Sorry, I
Yeah,
couldn't tell whether you said CAST or CASP.
the ELA in math. Oh, here it is.
They're going to be in Smarter Balanced. Yep.
Smart
And
balance.
remember, those practice tests are the longer versions. The training tests are smaller, only like 6 to 10 questions.
Let's go into the math. Oh, and it even has the computer adaptive test or the performance task. Let's look at a performance task. Now, these resources and these accommodations, do all students, do they get the opportunity to select their own, or are these preloaded for them?
So there's some of both. There's different kinds of accessibility resources on the assessments. There are universal tools that are available to all students, designated supports that are available to students based on adult identification. And then there are accommodations, and those accommodations are only for students that have either a 504 plan or an IEP.
Okay, so let's make sure I can hear it. I could hear it. Yes, and let's begin the test now. And so the performance tasks are usually a lot longer than the computer adaptive test. That's just one question after another. These are more situation and context based. So it has the situation here, all of the context that the child or the student will be working with. And then there are multiple questions based on that same context. So you have this question, and then you have multiple ones that you'll be able to go through and practice with your students.
And all of those questions that Dr. Cisneros just showed you are all related to that same task. So on the left-hand side, if you noticed, the passage didn't change. So this is, I think it was about making a movie. Yep, Abby is going to make a movie. And so there's information presented to the student in that passage or the stimulus on the left side, and they're going to take all of that information and then apply it to answer the 6 questions that follow.
And I'm noticing, Ms. Goodwin, that over some of the words there seems to be a dashed line.
Mhm.
And that is a definition?
Yes, yep.
Great. So parents, I've already put this into the chat for you. So you can either go to the training test with the sample questions, or this practice test if you want to see a much longer, more comprehensive example of what your students are going to be taking at different grades. And let me just briefly go back to the first slide that Ms. Goodwin shared with us, which is this one, that says that for the type of test that we were just looking at now, the math SBAC is for grades 3rd through 8th grade and 11th. So if they're 2nd and older, 9th, 10th, or 12th graders, they do not take it.
I want to address a question that we often get asked, and this may go along with one that was asked earlier about, why should a student take it, or why is it important that they take it? So it is a requirement. And students in those grade levels, 100% of our students are expected to take the assessments. LPAC is a federal requirement, and there is no opportunity for students not to take that test. So we will do everything that we can to make sure that we get student participation in that.
I'm going to drop into the chat for our community members here the link to the presentation that you provided, Ms. Goodwin, at the beginning of the school year on understanding the summative assessment results. Again, all of our dialogues or Zoom dialogues are all recorded and posted on our YouTube. So family, you can just go to our YouTube page and search for one, and everything that we do on these 5 to 6 webinars, they are there. I think for LPAC, Ms. Goodwin, it's a bit of an easier sell for parents and for students in this case on why it matters. I think the impetus or the fire below the child's foot to make sure that they reclassify, is that when they get into secondary, so middle and high school, if they have not reclassified, they might be placed into or they might be given an additional support class to help them reclassify, to help them really master the English language. It's the ELD class or maybe AALD class, depending on the child and depending on the site. But what that means is that if they are taking that class to help them reclassify, they're not able to then take band or art or any of these wonderful electives. I know at Loma Vista, we now have an agriculture class. At Wells, we have the workshop woodworking class. We have a lot of great electives and pathways and CTE pathways throughout the entire district, and the child may not be able to take that if they're an English learner who has not reclassified. And again, I think Ms. Goodwin, you hit the nail right on the head, because it's a federal requirement that students take the LPAC. So we have to get them all of the help that we can to get them to reclassify. Mr. Eric just asked a question that I don't know the answer to, and I don't know that this would be the right venue to wonder about that. The question is, what value of the test? What value is the test if the Federal Department of Education no longer exists, which seems to be occurring at this time? I don't know how to answer that. Ms. Goodwin, I don't know. Right now,
Yeah. We kind of have to operate based off of what we know as of this moment. And so I certainly can't speculate on what impact that may have moving forward.
a fascinating question, though.
Mhm.
So now we're at the point where we have a little bit of time left. It's 5:51, so we have 9 more minutes. Families, if you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask, you can either continue dropping it into the Q&A, or if you'd like to unmute your device and ask a question, we have our resident expert, Ms. Goodwin, who is our Director of Assessment for the entire district. She's here to answer your questions. All right, well, hearing none, I will drop in my phone number into the chat box. With my phone number, for the parent who asked a question specifically about the objectivity or subjectivity of grades, if you'd like us to connect you with your child's principal or connect directly with Ms. Goodwin, we can do that. I can facilitate that for you. But I think Ms. Goodwin had the right suggestion because grades are really directed by the teacher's assessment of your child's progress. I think the best place to start would be with a conversation, setting an appointment with the teacher. But my phone number is my cell phone. Please feel free, families, to call me or text me as you need. And Ms. Goodwin, can you please share about this QR code?
Sure, we just have a quick survey. It's one question. We're not collecting any information. We won't have your email address or your identity or anything like that on this particular survey, but we'd like to know if you found this helpful today. There are a couple of additional optional questions. It's another way, if you had a very specific question that maybe you didn't want to ask in the group, you can ask that question there. And if you feel comfortable, you can leave your contact information so that we can circle back to you as well. But it's an opportunity to help make sure that when we hold these sessions, we're presenting information that you find valuable, and we can make adjustments before we do this again next time.
Absolutely. And if there's another type of session or discussion that you would like to have us bring to you, or another resident expert or community expert, we can definitely do that. So hearing no other questions, I would like to just say thank you to Ms. Goodwin for providing this fantastic bit of information. But then also thank you to our Arabic interpreter, Ms. Naima, and to our Spanish interpreter, Ms. Yvonne, who make sure that all of our families, regardless of their English abilities, they can access the same information. This work is the information is key to make sure that families know who to contact, what the resources are, how to get their child's help. And we want to make sure that we are looping in and getting this access to as many families as we can. So we can't do this work without you. Thank you so much, Iwan, and thank you so much, Naima. And on that note, everybody have a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Cisneros.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.